The wave of terror continues with 3 more attacks in the West Bank today as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu travels to Washington for his first meeting with President Barack Obama in more than a year. Investigators say they are 90% sure that a bomb went off on the Russian plane that crashed in Sinai. This as Moscow evacuates thousands of its citizens from the Sinai Peninsula. And Myanmar holds historic elections. A reported 80% of the population votes with the opposition party of Aung San Suu Kyi expected to emerge victorious.
The News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening and welcome to the News Today. 7 Israelis were injured today in 3 separate terror attacks in the West Bank. 2 stabbings were preceded by a car ramming attack. It is the latest in a wave of violence that has lasted 2 months now. I-24 News military correspondent Shai Ben-Ari reports.
No end in sight to the current wave of terror in Israel and the West Bank, with several incidents occurring Sunday. Around 1 p.m. local time, a 48-year-old Jewish man was stabbed by 2 assailants after he stopped in the Palestinian village of Nabi Elias to do some shopping. The man was able to escape from the scene by car, driving to a checkpoint 5 kilometers away before collapsing. He was evacuated to hospital in serious condition. About 2 hours earlier, a woman approached the gate of the West Bank community of Beitar Elitz. While talking to a local security guard, she drew a knife, stabbing the guard in the abdomen, lightly injuring him.
The assailant seemed stressed, kept looking sideways, and she seemed like she's unfamiliar with the place. She presented me a Palestinian ID with no permits and spoke only in Arabic. I told her she's not authorized to enter, and she took out a knife from her bag and stabbed me. I drew my gun and was able to neutralize her.
The attacker, a 22-year-old woman from Bethlehem, was brought to a Jerusalem hospital in serious condition. This morning, a vehicular attack saw a Palestinian ram his car into a group of Israelis standing near Tapuach Junction in the central West Bank. One of the victims, a 22-year-old male, remains in serious condition. Another 21-year-old male was moderately injured. 3 others suffered light injuries, including 1 pregnant woman. Security forces at the scene opened fire on the vehicle, killing the terrorist.
When a man comes with an intention to kill, and he knows he's surrounded by police who will kill him immediately, and he has no problem with that. He isn't scared of anything. It's a feeling of helplessness, that you get up in the morning to live and someone else gets up to kill. This cannot continue.
Locals have become accustomed to these incidents.
I personally am not afraid because I've been living here since I was born. This happened all the time, so it's no longer frightening. I've gotten used to it.
Meanwhile, clashes between Palestinian protesters and Israeli soldiers broke out near Hebron, a daily occurrence in the area. In recent weeks, most of the attacks have taken place in the West Bank, targeting members of the Israeli security forces. Sunday, though, most of those injured were civilians.
And with me here in the studio is Shai Ben-Ari, I-24 News military correspondent. Good evening.
Good evening.
And also Avi Zachal, Middle East analyst. Good evening.
Good evening.
So Avi, Shai, let's start with you about just last siren alarms in the south of Israel about a missile being thrown from the Gaza Strip towards Israel.
You know, every few weeks we see this pop up once again. Today we're talking about a rocket fired in the area around the Gaza Strip and landing near one of the communities there in open areas. No one injured, thankfully. Most of these cases, we haven't seen any claim of responsibility yet. Most of these cases have been fired by a group affiliated with the Islamic State in Gaza, basically challenging the rule of Hamas there. Hamas has not actually fired a rocket basically since the end of the last war.
So we're talking today about more citizens being injured than any other day in the last 2 weeks, at least.
Right.
What is the difference?
Right. I'm not sure it's true that the attacks today basically targeted civilians. I'm not sure I would rush to associate that with any concerted actual effort on behalf of the attackers. In Beitar Elitz, it was a civilian, but actually a civilian security guard. In Tapuach, it is often border police or IDF forces who were stationed at these intersections. In this case, though, civilians were hurt. We've been seeing that much of the Palestinian narrative in attempts to justify these attacks, basically say these are IDF forces in occupied territory, members of an occupation force. Also, there's an attempt to call the settlers occupiers in occupied territory, therefore justifying the attacks. Whether you accept that kind of logic or not, there's no denying the ferocity of these attacks. From the Israeli point of view, there's, of course, little tolerance for this kind of thing, and the directions are to shoot to neutralize. It does often end with the death of the attackers, as it did in Tapur today, but in other cases, it ends with injury, as it did in Beit Harlit. The attacker is currently in an Israeli hospital.
Avi, we are seeing these footage. This is almost, you cannot digest this. It's like you're seeing the car ramming people over. You're seeing the woman just taking out a knife and trying to stab a person. This is becoming something normal here. And for the Palestinians also, to just get up in the morning and just take a knife and go and stab people. This is not normal.
This is the new third intifada. Whether we want to call it an intifada or not, whether it looks like the second one or the first one or not, at the end of the day, when we're counting the 38th day of this ongoing attacks, every day, stabbing, running with cars, shooting sometimes, just like what happened on Friday, I think that we can define it now as a third uprising. It's completely different than the ones that we had known.
What is stopping the Israeli officials, the Israeli government, from actually, or security forces, or security cabinet, to actually call it a third intifada?
I think that they don't want to call it an intifada because that would create some kind of a feeling among the public of complete panic. Now we're half panicked. It's only in the West Bank. First we thought that it's only in Hebron. Then it came out of Hebron. Today we had 3 different attacks, not in Hebron. So I guess that the attempt, generally speaking, on the Israeli side and also on the Palestinian side, is trying to decrease the panic level, meaning not to call it an intifada. Some of Palestinian officials call it heba, explosion. In Israel, they call it a wave of terrorism, and a wave has to end at some point, but it doesn't end. It continues on and on and on. This is why I'm saying, this is part of our job to say more or less the truth, or the way that we see the truth. This is an intifada. And you cannot really explain this. You cannot explain a 13-year-old boy that is trying to stab someone with a knife. You cannot even explain a 73-year-old woman that is trying to run with her car some soldiers.
And basically, let's say the military forces, the military establishment has no explanation about this whatsoever.
I don't know if there's no explanation, but there's no real solution, let's say. These kinds of attacks, often we see them happen in open intersections. There are certain security measures currently in place, decided on last week in Hebron, for example, where much of the violence has shifted to begin with measures similar to what was established in Jerusalem earlier, where you're seeing now certain Palestinians between the ages of 15 and 25 blocked from entering the Jewish neighborhoods there. But is that relevant to other areas where we often see attacks, like at intersections? You can't even enforce the same kinds of tactics. It's a totally different thing. I would say, Netanyahu mentioned it a few weeks ago, he doesn't have a real solution. He was basically calling for a stiff upper lip from the Israeli public, basically to just bear down and get through this. How long it will take, it's a good question. And you can also look at it very cynically, unfortunately. When it happens in the West Bank, when you talk about Israeli society, there seems to be a greater understanding, not for the attacks themselves, but a greater resilience, or perhaps an ability to go on with this situation.
We are hearing in your report, one civilian is saying this situation cannot continue anymore, and we are hearing another civilian saying we're used to it. This is our life. We grew into it. But Avi, the silence coming from the Palestinian Authority in this specific case, in this specific time, this is something that I'm not used to hear, the silence, because it seems like the Palestinian Authority is just watching on this entire situation and just looking for some kind of a signal from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do something, and it's not.
It's not going to come. I think that we're not going to hear the Palestinian Authority condemning these kinds of attacks all the time that's in the West Bank, all the times that it's aimed to soldiers and settlers, soldiers and settlers. For them, there's no difference between the two. And now Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to Washington to meet with President Obama. And maybe some Palestinian officials hope that something will come out of this meeting. But bottom line, We understand already now that nothing is going to come out of this except for some kind of warming between Israel and the U.S., but nothing regarding the Palestinian Authority or the Palestinians in general.
Yeah, in this specific situation, in this specific story, just stay with me for this. Shai Ben-Ari, thank you very much for the update. Israel's premier left for Washington today for a much-anticipated meeting with U.S. President Barack Obama at the White House. Billed as a fence-mending visit, many items are on the agenda. Perhaps for most, a massive military aid package Jerusalem is seeking in the wake of the Iran deal. Eli Ochenberg, diplomatic correspondent for the News Today, has more.
It's been over 1 year since the last meeting between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. President Barack Obama, but there has been no shortage of controversy. From the Iran nuclear deal to Netanyahu's speech in Congress, from the stalled peace process to the sometimes below-the-belt personal and public bickering, U.S.-Israeli relations have seen better days.
For all the objections of Prime Minister Netanyahu, or for that matter, some of the Republican leadership that's already spoken, none of them have presented to me or the American people a better alternative.
It's a very bad deal. We're better off without it.
But the harsh rhetoric has dissipated.
We never forget that the most important partner that Israel has always been and will always be the United States of America.
In less than 24 hours, the two leaders, or frenemies, will try to put the past behind them. And what does the future hold? A lot of money.
I believe that this meeting is important in order to make clear the continuation of the trajectory of American aid for Israel in the coming decade. It will be an additional step in consolidating understanding of this matter.
In the post-Iran deal era, business is the main objective. Topping the agenda in the Obama-Netanyahu meeting is the so-called military compensation package for Israel, or, as it has been referred to in Israel, Bibi's shopping list. For weeks, U.S. and Israeli officials have been formulating a decade-long framework agreement, which will reportedly provide Israel with military aid totaling $40 to $50 billion.
Make no mistake, this deal limits Iran, but it places no limits on the United States, the Department of Defense, or the U.S.-Israeli defense relationship. We're moving full speed ahead. Deterrence remains a major part of our strategy here.
For the White House, however, expectations for the meeting are not high. The Americans have conceded that a diplomatic breakthrough between Israel and the Palestinians is unlikely before Obama leaves office. A simple reiteration of Netanyahu's commitment to the two-state solution will thus be satisfactory at this stage. The Israeli premier is expected to present Obama with a list of goodwill gestures towards the Palestinians, leaving the door open for future negotiations.
The only way that Israel is going to be truly secure, and the only way that the Palestinians are going to be able to meet the aspirations of their people is if there are two states living side by side in peace and security.
There is no love lost between Obama and Netanyahu, and their 16th meeting is not expected to be warm. Rather, much more humble goals have been set: the implementation of trust-building measures. After so many mutual letdowns, such realistic expectations might be the key to a successful encounter.
I don't know if Barack Obama is actually smiling now, but joining me with a big smile is Eli Ochenberg, diplomatic correspondent for the News Today. Let's try to maybe imagine what can be the first conversation that Benjamin Netanyahu and Barack Obama will conduct in the White House.
Well, let's put it mildly, neither side has great expectations from this meeting. The main goal is for it to pass quietly.
Do you really,
why are you so shocked?
I'm like in shock because we're talking about $50 billion. It's not great expectations. For me, it would be really great expectations.
Well, when you'll be a state, so it won't count. No, but this compensation, much talked about compensation package is actually good for both sides. For Israel, the benefit is quite obvious. And for Obama or for the United States, it's not that bad either. Obama, for him to end his very controversial term when it comes to his relationship with Israel, is not a bad thing to leave it with the ending tone of giving Israel the biggest compensation, military compensation aid ever. So it's a very good tone. More than that, it's good for him, for his predecessor, for Hillary Clinton, maybe if she will win the primary elections, to not to be in the shadow of the not so good relationship Obama had with Netanyahu. But I have to say that the Iran deal, which triggered this request for the compensation, it didn't end there, because the Gulf countries, who were also very disappointed or frustrated with this with the deal with Iran, Israel got the chance to demand even a greater package because of what the Gulf countries received, and they wanted to reassure Israel's status when it comes to military strength.
I believe that Barack Obama will consider giving a bigger package to Israel. Maybe it will put him in a let's say a
better light.
Better light, yes, a greater light. But I want to ask you about the voices that are coming today from the White House, officials from the White House, talking about a one-state solution and talking about the idea of two-state solution, that it's dead. No more two-state solution. We are going towards one-state solution. This is very bad, or maybe that was the aim of Benjamin Netanyahu.
I don't think that that was the aim of Benjamin Netanyahu, because if he will need to deal with a one-state solution, he will need to give some rights to the Palestinian future to come citizens, and I don't think that he intended that. He wanted to keep the status quo as is. Now, it's not going to work. Now, we all understand that on the 38th day of this ongoing intifada, or whatever you want to call it, you know what? Whatever you want to call it, on the ongoing of the 38th intifada, you need to find some kind of a breakthrough, some kind of a change. Unless you really, you point your people towards a catastrophe, towards nothing. And I guess that what the White House is trying to do right now is pushing Netanyahu and warning him, saying, look, if you're not going to do brave acts towards the Palestinians, brave gestures towards the Palestinians, and it's not enough about giving them a million more, a million less, a quarter of a kilometer there or a quarter of a kilometer there. At the end of the day, you need to do something bigger than just gestures or economic gestures, because Netanyahu is going to come with a package, an economic package to the Palestinians. It's not enough anymore. And I think that the Israeli leadership still, after 38th day, doesn't understand that.
And what they don't understand what maybe Mahmoud Abbas is understanding, and this is why he went to Egypt for what? To seek help, to ask for help?
I guess. I think that he's trying to find some kind of a solution, and there's no solution even for Mahmoud Abbas. I mean, what can he do? The negotiations with Hamas failed. Now he is trying to go again to the Egyptians, saying, okay, I will send some forces to the passages between Gaza and Egypt, and by that maybe I will show some kind of strength, and people in Gaza and the West Bank will like me more. He doesn't have any plan.
Will he get any help from Egypt when, from what we understand, from the analysis that we're getting, Egypt supports Mohammed Dahlan? This is something that he really imagines that he will get?
He might get some support from the Egyptian side, but depends on what would be the price. Meaning they won't support him if the price would be to go to some kind of concessions vis-a-vis Hamas. They won't allow Hamas to be present in Rafah passage, for example. But bottom line here is, look, Abbas is hopeless. He doesn't have any plan. He doesn't have any future. He understands that his era is about to end. And I think he adopted, in a way, Netanyahu's status quo strategy, meaning the only thing that is left for him is to hope to survive the next coming months, maybe a year, maybe a two, not talking about more than that, because talking about peace right now looks completely illusionary.
Not only that talking about peace looks like completely out of...
far-fetched.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think, even if Benjamin Netanyahu will come back with a demand from the Palestinians to act, from the United States, to actually give something to the Palestinians, who will pass it in Benjamin Netanyahu's government?
This is the thing, that Netanyahu is stuck, or not stuck from choice, with a very difficult government to push for brave diplomatic endeavors or acts. And indeed, we can expect Netanyahu not discuss any retreat from settlements or any territorial claims whatsoever, but only to reduce friction in the form you were talking about earlier in this show. But to hear explicitly from advisors in the White House that they are no longer hoping for a peace process to be finalized, or even to start within the course of the upcoming year, it's definitely something unusual.
But hey, we're going to have $15 billion.
Yes, we can use them for other things like
Eli Ochemberg, thank you very much. You are staying with me. According to a CNN report, Israel is the country which relied intelligence to the U.S., leading to the assessment that the Russian plane which crashed in the Sinai Peninsula was brought down by a bomb. Pentagon officials had earlier claimed communications had been picked up between Islamic State militants in Sinai. More in the following report from Uri Shapira.
It is more than a week since a Russian airliner crashed in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, and potential answers are starting to emerge. On Sunday, a member of the investigation team told Reuters that he is 90% sure a bomb downed the flight, killing 224 people on board. Officials based the analysis on a sudden, mysterious sound recorded by the cockpit's black box right before the plane broke up in mid-air. However, other possibilities are not being ruled out.
Which scenarios are on the table? All scenarios are on the table. It may be the lithium batteries or one of the passengers. It may be an explosion in the fuel tank. It may be fatigue to the body of the plane.
Concern of follow-up attacks prompted Russia to evacuate thousands of its citizens from Sinai as additional airlines decided to suspend their flights from the area. The president of Emirates Airline called the incident a game-changer for the industry.
This means that the aviation industry, as well as the various countries involved in all of this, of which Europe, the Middle East, America, will be getting into some kind of caucus forum to find out what can be done.
Meanwhile, UK officials dismissed a report by the Daily Mail newspaper that a British jet was forced to take action to avoid a rocket that came within 1,000 feet of it last August. But when asked if the Islamic State group has the ability to attack the passenger plane, British Foreign Minister Philip Hammond answered ambiguously.
Well, it's not impossible, but we've seen no evidence yet that they do have this kind of equipment. And clearly, airlines and aviation security organizations take into account.
This is, of course, not the first time that the peninsula has come under the threat of terrorism. What once was considered a lost paradise inside the troubled Middle East may well become barren.
And still with me here in the studio is Avi Sakharov. Let's talk a little bit about the chances, and there was a report today that was published in the United States about the chances of Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to actually stay in his position with everything that is happening. What are the chances that the people won't go for another uprising and will tell him, you're not delivering, get out?
For the meanwhile, I don't see someone who's emerging in Egypt and going against Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. He managed to do a big, I would say, root work inside Egypt in order to unroot the Muslim Brotherhood and in order to weaken the threat that is coming from the Islamic radical side. So at the end of the day, when you look around Egypt, you don't find an immediate threat. Now, of course, we know that trends can change pretty fast. But bottom line, listen, since June 2013, he's getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Although Egypt is getting weaker and weaker as a state, but he himself, as the president, is becoming stronger. So I don't see anyone challenging him.
You know, I'm seeing the world, and I'm seeing the way that the world is reacting to ISIS. And, you know, we are seeing the campaign in Iraq and in Syria and in Yemen and okay, the international campaign, but yet again, I see the behavior, and it seems that everybody is too calm about this situation with ISIS, and it seems that all the world is not maybe taking them really in a serious matter, really taking them seriously, because if they manage to take down a plane, maybe it's about time that the world will start looking at it a little bit in a harsher way than only air campaigns.
Look, I think that what we see today on the ground in Syria is very dramatic about ISIS. I think that what we see from Egypt regarding ISIS in Sinai is very dramatic. At the end of the day, it's not that complicated to put a bomb inside a plane. This is much more worrying what happened last June or last July, and forget me if I don't remember well, but the attack, the simultaneous attack of 200 jihadists storming Egyptian compounds in Sinai, that was a worrying sign. Since then, what we had seen is, and again, an operation, a big operation from the Egyptian side against those jihadists, and since then, it calmed down a bit. Then came this attack with the plane, that probably they gave someone enough money in order to put the bomb inside this plane. Or maybe, like some rumors are saying, that they planted in someone, inside his body, a bomb, just like the Wall Street Journal was saying, inside his body, he got on the plane and then exploded.
Just let's listen from Jacob Wirtschafter, I-24 News contributor in Egypt. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Hi, Lucy. I have to say that your assessment of the anger about ISIS and the feeling that people have been too calm about it is exactly the line that the Sisi administration has been articulating over the past week. They've been saying, we think this organization is serious. We've been warning the West. ISIS is a threat. You guys aren't standing with us strongly enough against terrorism. So the piece about positioning ISIS as the enemy and Egypt's enemy, you're on Sisi's page, even though you're frustrated maybe with his performance.
So, Jacob, let's see, and you are just pointing this out. The Egyptians, you know, you are following the social media, you're following the media in Egypt, how they are reacting to the recent reports that it might has been somebody from the inside, somebody from the Egyptian forces or Egyptian officials that actually helped ISIS to put a bomb on the plane.
Well, I think, again, the level of anger is palatable. Obviously, there are elements in the Sinai that are against this government. And the question is how hard the government is going to hit against those elements and how good are their tools to do so? You know, do they have a strong enough infrastructure? I mean, the Army's been hitting them hard, but can they eliminate them? And is the West going to allow Egypt to take the measures that it's likely to want to take to knock out Ansar Beit al-Maqdis? I think that's the question.
Yes, Jacob Wirtschafter, thank you very much for this conversation. One last question, Avi. We are talking about how many fighters in IS? 100,000, 150,000?
Where?
All around the world or in the Middle East?
No, I would say much smaller numbers. I mean, right now the general assessment in Israel is that we're talking in Syria and Iraq altogether about 30,000.
30,000?
30,000,
so
not more than that. You know what? 40,000.
You know what? 100,000.
No. It's not even close there.
So how come the world is not able to cope with this? Because what? The world didn't understand and the international community didn't understand that it's all about ideology and not about forces on the ground?
You know what? This includes also forces on the ground. Let us not be mistaken about that. I mean, the Americans are bombing them. The Russians are bombing them. There are Iranian troops on the ground. There are Hezbollah troops on the ground. And of course, the Syrian army. And still, you don't see a breakthrough in Syria. Still, they even reoccupy some territories in Homs area, for example, while losing some others in Syria.
Avi Zakharov, thank you very much for being with me in this half an hour. Let's go out for a break, 2 minutes, and I'll be back for the second part of the news today. Don't go anywhere. The wave of terror continues with 3 more attacks in the West Bank today as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu travels to Washington for his first meeting with President Barack Obama in more than a year. Investigators say they are 90% sure that a bomb went off on the Russian plane that crashed in Sinai. This as Moscow evacuates thousands of its citizens from the peninsula. And Myanmar holds historic elections. A reported 80% of the population votes, with the opposition party of Aung San Suu Kyi expected to emerge victorious. Welcome Welcome back to the news today. A reported 80% of eligible voters cast a ballot today in Myanmar's first fair and free general elections in a quarter of a century. Opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi is predicted to come out on top, with the military saying it won't respect any outcome. I-24 News correspondent Ayman Siksik reports.
A landmark vote in Myanmar, though the official winners of Sunday's vote will not be announced for a few days. Voters in the Southeast Asian nation flocked to the ballots today, with some estimates indicating an 80% turnout. As for many, this signaled the first time they ever cast their votes. After 5 decades of military rule, the election of a government is a foreign concept for most of these voters.
I am so happy. I hope I can have a peaceful and happy life.
I've never been this excited in my life before. My family and I reminded each other that we were going to vote tomorrow. We planned to get up early so that we could go to the voting station first thing in the morning.
But despite the appearance of ushering in a new democracy and the rise of the opposition party, the National League for Democracy, led by Aung San Suu Kyi, much remains uncertain about the outcome. Though the election has been marked by the star power of 70-year-old Suu Kyi, 25% of seats in parliament are still guaranteed for the military, causing many to ask to what extent Myanmar will be able to implement the results of today's vote. European Union observers stationed here for fear the election might be swayed explained the challenges for the process for a new democracy.
Is it a genuine election? Can people actually choose between different candidates? Can they vote in secret? Is their vote free from intimidation, or are there people campaigning still around the polling stations? These are the things we look at.
Suu Kyi had won an election before, in 1990, when she swept the country in a landslide win for the NLD. But the military junta annulled her win and put her under prolonged house arrest. It now remains to be seen if Suu Kyi's second win in Myanmar will also be her first victory.
What are the chances that it will happen? Soor Shizaf, writer and journalist, is here with me in the studio. Good evening.
Good evening. Well, what are the chances that it will happen? I think it will, but you should always remember that the military junta actually sort of like eased the scene because it needs the world support. Now, it needs the world support because this country has no really outside relations besides China and India. And I think that the Chinese nor the Indians needs Myanmar very much. I mean, the Chinese used for many years Yangon or Rangoon, the port, as alternative port for time of crisis, because then they will not have to move the fleet through the Malacca Straits, which are dangerous with pirates and can be easily blocked. But I think because of the ties to Central Asia, they need now less Myanmar or Burma, and therefore they assist less the military junta.
So if we just heard that the military eased the situation to actually give the opportunity to go and have legal democratic elections, what are the chances that they will actually respect the results and they will actually let her work into the process of taking Myanmar to a real democracy?
I think that what they are doing is they are leaving themselves the control of the borders, the control of the Interior Ministry, and the control of the Foreign Office, which are sort of like the external links to the world. And they say, okay, we cannot really control the rage of the monasteries and the monks and the people that don't really like us. You deal with them. You let us, the outside connections, will control the outside connections, and the military might, so sort of like, I think, probably a bit like Turkey in the 60s and 70s, we let you govern the people, but we hold all the external affairs. So that is going to be the outcome of it, and I don't think that the junta will go back on it. It's not a full democracy, but it's a huge step forward to what it used to be.
I don't want to not talk good words on behalf of someone who won the Nobel Prize for Peace, but I'm trying to understand why she stood aside when she was asked to intervene for or on behalf of the Muslim minority in the country. Was it only political, let's say, agenda that led her to this decision?
This is one of the, I think you touched now, one of the most crucial things that a lot of people ignore. There is the Rohingya minority. About 3 million people lives in the north of Myanmar or Burma, and they are deprived of any rights. They're not allowed to travel, they're not allowed to be full citizens, education.
Something that she knows on her flesh.
Of course. Yeah. But you speak about a country which holds about 60 million people, 58 or 60 million people. This is, you know, a small minority, 5%. It's not even the proportion that we speak in Israel of about 20%. Yes, and the thing is that people tend to forget that Myanmar, like Sri Lanka, has got a majority of Buddhism, which is not the Buddhism of Tibet, China, and Japan. It's another type.
Military.
No. You're not wrong, because this is something like we take the Buddhism. Buddhism is divided into Mahayana and Hinayana. It doesn't matter. We'll not go into Buddhism, but the oldest one, the Hinayana, is the one who rules Sri Lanka and Myanmar. And in that, you might speak about a church in a way. And the monks are very aggressive, they're very military, and there is something that is very basically against the Muslims. And therefore, if Suu Kyi needs the help of the monks to actually push towards democracy and the creation of a civil society, she has to be, in a way, against the Muslims because it's religious.
Politics.
Again, yes. Ethnic and religious politics, yes.
Tzur Shizov, thank you very much for this great explanation. Thank you very much. In Croatia, opinion polls suggest a conservative opposition bloc will win today's elections by a narrow margin. It is the latest European vote in which the growing migrant crisis was a central issue. Michal Divon has more.
Croats headed to the polls Sunday, the first election since Croatia joined the European Union in 2013. The ruling center-left coalition is facing a strong challenge from a conservative opposition as it struggles to boost a fragile economy and amid a rapid surge in migration from the Middle East. According to opinion polls, the center-right HDZ-led Patriotic Coalition held a slim lead going into the vote.
Absolutely, we will be the winners. You will see that tonight, so of course I am optimistic. I expect high turnout, and I believe this election will be a real demonstration of the democracy Croatia deserves.
Both parties promised different approaches to handle the refugee influx, a topic that was central to the campaign. The conservative opposition favors a tougher stance than the ruling Social Democrats, urging stricter border controls to manage the flow of people crossing Croatia on their way to Western Europe.
We had quite a passionate campaign. Unfortunately, it has also been marked by the migrant crisis and the hate speech HDZ and its helpers have been spreading throughout the country for years now.
More than 330,000 migrants have passed through Croatia since mid-September, a daily rate of 5,000 to 10,000 people. Only a few stay in Croatia, where unemployment stands at 16%. The HDZ party, which steered Croatia to independence from Yugoslavia in 1991, had accused the current administration of being soft and incompetent in handling the crisis.
And with me right now is Sandra Gjajic, freelance translator, web editor, and blogger. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Good evening. Thank you very much to contact me.
So, Sandra, can we say that maybe the results are obvious if we're seeing what is happening in Europe and the migrant crisis? That just worked in the benefit of all the right-wing parties that wanted to take over the government.
Well, the first unofficial results will be announced at 10 p.m. today, Croatia time. And now we have only the results from unofficial polls, which were taken today. And the result is the most uncertain result till we have a parliamentary election in the last 20 years. Both parties became 56 mandates in a parliament, which isn't enough to get the government. And well, the result is, I can say, we thought the result will be like this, and first the very, very good position took list of malls.
Yes, unfortunately, Sandra, we have some technical problems. We cannot hear you very good. We will try the line later on. Thank you very much for now. And we're going to the next somewhere else in the world, in the United States. Controversy continues to swirl around the top two Republican presidential contenders for Donald Trump. It was an appearance last night on the iconic Saturday Night Live show. For Ben Carson, it is just his entire past. Charles Biblazer, deputy editor for the News Today, reports.
This is the response to Donald Trump hosting Saturday Night Live, the latest in a long line of moves to draw the ire of the masses, especially Hispanic groups.
We believe he's a racist and a bigot. He said some very hurtful words against the Latino community, calling us killers, rapists, criminals, and drug dealers.
It may be an example of money trumping principle. Earlier this year, NBC Universal said it was ending its relationship with the Republican frontrunner for his controversial comments. Trump was able to weather the ensuing tsunami of criticism, transforming it into a gigantic wave of momentum that propelled him into the lead. But along came Ben Carson, who was closing the gap in the polls. Now, however, Carson appears primed to overtake Trump in an altogether different department: controversy. The former neurosurgeon has come under intense scrutiny, with the spotlight now squarely focused on his checkered past. It is made for some uncomfortable, if not bizarre, encounters, including this one on Fox News with Megyn Kelly.
You stand by the claim that you, as a young man, as a 14-year-old boy, attempted to stab another boy and attacked your mother with a hammer.
Those claims are absolutely true. You know, I am 100% sure that they are true.
As the media digs deeper, more questions are emerging. Carson believes he is being subjected to a witch hunt.
They have been talking to everybody I've ever known, everybody I've ever seen. There's got to be a scandal. There's got to be some nurse he's having an affair with. There's got to be something. They are getting desperate. So next week it'll be my kindergarten teacher who said I peed in my pants.
The appeal of both Trump and Carson in large part derives from their being anti-establishment figures, untainted by politics. But reputations can be tarnished by other means. While Trump has shown his resilience, it is Carson's turn to prove that he has staying power.
Charles Biblazer, deputy editor of the News Today, is here. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
What did your kindergarten teacher will say about you, Charles?
Lucy, this whole ordeal is turning into a bit of a circus, I must say. I've never really seen anyone defend with such vigor attacks on his own mother with a hammer.
With a hammer?
Never mind a legitimate, well, perhaps a past legitimate presidential candidate, because the spotlight has not been kind to Dr. Ben Carson.
Wow, Charles, this is becoming a circus. This is not a presidential campaign. This is just one comic episode after the other, and this is just...
Speaking of comic episodes, you had Donald Trump, the front runner, hosting Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Here,
Ben
so
Carson.
this is okay.
This
so
is comic.
This is Ben Carson's ad that he ditched and blamed its. It blamed it on his Ben Carson. Can we get a little volume from
Just
DJ
a little bit
Shy?
more volume.
So that people understood the value of personal responsibility.
Yeah, this is awesome.
And by the way, DJ Shy is our editor.
Yeah, DJ Shy is putting the music on, and Ben Carson is awesome.
Okay, so basically the Republican race has has devolved, and I use the word devolved, backwards evolution, into what type of class Ben Carson attended at Yale, whether or not he saved a group of Caucasian classmates when he was in his early teens, whether or not he was held up at gunpoint at a Popeyes restaurant in his 20s. I mean, this is really, it's kit and caboodle. It's really, it's just become, and all of this, mind you, is happening on basically with the fourth Republican debate upcoming on Tuesday. It is going to be an absolute nightmare for the frontrunners.
Please tell me, because I'm trying to understand the American people here, the American society, the American voter who is watching this, hearing this, yo, Ben Carson, watching Donald Trump on Saturday night with a lot of other Trumps. What is going on?
I have to tell you, the only message, there are two messages. One, that it's simply the American culture has become this kind of, it's become an homage to this type of culture. Secondly, that they're fed up with the political establishment. That's really the message that you have to take for it.
But they do understand that the next president will have to face ISIS, will have to face the situation in Syria, will have to face the situation in Iraq, will have to face the situation in Afghanistan, and God knows that he will have to face the situation also inside the United States.
And we'll probably have to deal with Bibi for a fifth term.
Yes.
They get it, but their anger is such a degree that it may be clouding their judgment. This is one of the reasons why I firmly believe that you're going to have establishment figures such as Rubio, perhaps even Bush, Ted Cruz, maybe even Christie making a late push into the forefront. This is ultimately otherwise what you're going to get.
Charlie, it's just like, yo.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, man. Oh my God. Elections somewhere else. Prime Minister Narendra Modi suffered a heavy defeat today in an election in Bihar, India's third most populous state. Modi's second straight setback in a regional vote is expected to strengthen opposition parties, thereby raising the prospects he may not win a second term. The loss in Bihar will also hamper Modi's push to pass economic reforms because of the lack of control of Parliament. And joining me right now is R.K. Krishna, Senior Deputy Editor at the Frontline magazine. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Good evening.
Mr. Krishna, do you think that this is something that Narendra Modi should be worried about, or this is just, you know, another vote? It's okay. Not everybody loves you. Not everybody accept you. And this is okay.
Yeah, the point happens to be that he should have just taken this as yet another election in a province, but unfortunately he did not, and he did put up a lot of stake on this particular election. Why he needed to take this seriously is because there are two houses in the Indian Parliament. One is the Lok Sabha, which the people elect directly, and the upper house, Rajya Sabha. And in the upper house, the BJP at the center does not have the numbers. Now, if they had won this particular provincial poll, they could have sent, members to the upper house by the end of next year, and they could have had, additional members and they could have easily passed their laws. Now, that is the only practical difficulty here. Otherwise, it was very much yet another provincial election in which, unfortunately, the Prime Minister staked a lot, and which is really unfortunate because he's doing well on the development front.
Do you think that this result might change the way that he is going to reform or to conduct his reforms in the future, or to just emphasize his reforms in the future, or to change it?
I don't think so. Essentially, the way that Narendra Modi has worked from the time he has been the head of a province in Gujarat has been the same, because he has always pressed on the development agenda, always tried to bring in foreign direct investment, and always tried to be on the same path wherever it took him. So he has not moved away from the path. Of course, he didn't lose an election in Gujarat, but I don't see him, radically altering his position, because that is something that his government and his party just cannot do. Because they may base themselves on their base is the Hindu majority population of India. So you can't significantly alter the course at this point of time.
Let's, Mr. Krishna, talk a little bit about the visit in Kashmir and the relationship in Pakistan. How is what is the situation of the relationship right now?
Oh, don't even ask about it. I think India is up a very bad place when it comes to relationships with its neighbors. We have problems in Maldives with the president causing Yamin Abdullah posing up to the Chinese. We have Sri Lanka, where we have not made any headway. Bangladesh is one soft, actually good spot. Nepal, we have all kinds of trouble with the new chief minister again, new prime minister again causing up to China. And, it's a mess. The relations between the neighbors is a mess. With Pakistan, it is particularly pathetic. The move to go to Kashmir is obviously trying to qualify the people of Kashmir, give them a package so that you can win back some of the support. I am not very sure that has had the desired effect. So all in all, on foreign relations and on relations in Kashmir, it's not looking up at all.
Yes, Mr. R.K. Krishna, thank you very much. Danyavat, we say, right? Yes. Thank you very much for this. Israel's fifth president passed away yesterday at the age of 94. The name Yitzhak Navon may not be widely known outside of the country, but here he was considered one of the last living members of Israel's founders. Uri Shapira has the story.
He was a distinguished man and nobleman who was above all modest. Israel said goodbye to this man Saturday. The country's fifth president, Yitzhak Navon, passed away at the age of 94. Born in Jerusalem in 1921, Navon was one of Israel's first political leaders of Sephardic background. His family originated in Africa and he spoke fluent Arabic. In 1968, he became a parliament member for the ruling Labour Party, and in 1978, Navon was elected president. Navon was known for his uncompromising political approach. In 1982, he threatened to resign unless a commission was created to investigate the massacre at the Sabra and Shatila refugee camp in southern Lebanon. The incident saw hundreds of Palestinians and Shiite Lebanese killed by Christian militia in a territory controlled by the watchful eye of Israeli forces. Eventually, a committee was formed which recommended Defense Minister Ariel Sharon be dismissed.
It was a moral issue of the first rate. We did not participate in the murder, but we were there near Sabra and Shatila, and we must have found out what happened.
As president, Navon was highly hailed for his tolerance towards Israel's Arab population and was known for his concern about the divisions within society.
The differences among us are not new, and we shouldn't be scared of them. It is naive to think that we can reach one political point of view. The question is not whether we have disagreements, but how to manage our disputes. My fellow Israelis, I truly think we are much better than we look.
Navon was the first and last president to return to the political arena after leaving office. He became Minister of Education in the 1984 unity government. Navon may have not been a charismatic leader, but he was one of the last uncontroversial Israeli presidents. This may have been his greatest attribute, but also the reason why he is not one of the most memorable leaders in Israeli history.
And with me now is to speak a little bit about the first subject that we spoke about earlier this edition, Dr. Alex Coleman, value creation expert at the Academic College of Tel Aviv. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
We're going to talk about Egypt and the damage that the recent accident, the recent crash just caused it, and it's a big damage.
It's huge. Egypt's economy is a really sorry economy in the sense that it's primitive. They do not have industry. They have agriculture, which is very, very backward. In this, if you see, I visited Egypt like half a year ago, so the vegetables are really tiny, very naive vegetables. So they have energy, which is the gas that we love, and also they have tourism. And tourism is fabulous, but I was there half a year ago. You can go to the pyramids, to the Sphinx. There's no lines, no nothing, because after the Arab summer, spring,
summer, cold summer, it was very hard.
It was hot.
Yes.
So after the summer, Arab Spring, tourists stopped coming. Now, the interesting thing was that I think many tourists, particularly Russians, which are a third of the tourists, we're talking about something like 10 million tourists altogether going to Egypt, about a third of them are Russian. They went to Sinai, and Sinai has fabulous beaches we loved. We used to go to those beaches.
Yeah, I miss...
Yes, it's
totally
so sad.
Yes.
And when you see all those developments that were invested by the biggest hotel companies, and you see them basically deserted. So I think that the problem with Egypt was that they neglected Sinai. They somehow perceived Sinai to be beyond the canal or something of the sort. So when I visited Egypt, I had full...
I'm trying to think from the point of view of the big companies, like, for example, David, Intercontinental, and Marriott, and more companies, like just Hyatt, and all the big hotels that have, like, all these hotels in the Sinai Peninsula, and they don't have any income.
Yes.
Why they are still there? Why they're not closing the hotels?
I think well, this is a small economic trick. When you make a big investment, as long as it operates, you can still predict very optimistic. You can still make very optimistic predictions. When you shut it down, you see the bottom line. So if you're an executive and you initiated such a project, the moment you shut it down, we see the value of your ideas. So as long as it's an ongoing operation, you can be very creative with the numbers.
Nothing that, let's, for example, if you want to give let's say, some kind of a suggestion to Egypt, what to do, how you can be better, it would be in one word?
It's just make sure that Sinai is a safe place. Just clean it up. Make sure that tourists can go to Sinai and actually enjoy the peace of mind.
Sounds easy, Alex. Sounds really easy. The world is working on it, but it's not working on it in a very successful way.
Yes.
Dr. Alex Goman, thank you very much for this. We're going out for a break. 10 minutes, an update from our news desk, and then we will be back for the rest of the news today. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the news today. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has many times over the years threatened to step down or even dissolve the PA entirely. But there are growing signs he might be seriously considering retirement. As such, a power struggle is emerging within the Palestinian leadership. Here with me in the studio to discuss this issue is Amir Oren, defense and government analyst for our outstanding newspaper. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
Ali Waqt, senior Middle East analyst.
Good evening, Lucy.
And also Ashraf Al-Ajrami, former Palestinian Minister of Prisoners Affairs. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. Let's start talking about the possibility that that's it. Mahmoud Abbas just gave up. He doesn't want to deal with that anymore. And right now, this is why he's just looking at the entire situation from the side.
I think it is serious because President Mahmoud Abbas feels that everything is bad. The reconciliation with Hamas doesn't go well. It is stopped totally. Also, the peace process is blocked also, and everything in his dealing with the Palestinian issue doesn't go in a good way. So he feels tired and he wants to leave. But unfortunately, the circumstances don't give him to leave smoothly, because the Palestinian situation, the Palestinian Authority situation is not easy to live just like that, because there is no new elections, and there is also no arrangement within Fatah movement to consider the deputy of the president or any personality that can replace his position.
And on that note, we are seeing that the United States is not just holding him and telling him, please don't leave, please just stop these threats from being or from calling and being out loud. They're just looking at the situation, and they might be saying, you know what, maybe it's better that you will step down. Maybe we given up on you also?
Well, this is a game because, first of all, the retirement of rulers in the Arab world is very rare. Some of them have been deposed, some of them have been assassinated, but just like that, because someone is old and tired and then they retire, this is a rarity. Now, we have known in the past, and we're not sure whether precedents apply here, we have seen that after Nasser, there was a Sadat for 11 years, and after Arafat, there is now Abu Mazen for 11 years, and who knows, maybe his health is not excellent, but out of his own free will, just like that, retire before he has any achievement to show for his term in office, and before his legacy is assured. You know, the real unfortunate fact is that there is no compatibility in the pairs of leaders. When there was a moderate Israeli leader like Eshkol, there was a Nasser. When there was a moderate like Sadat, there was a Golda Meir. When there was Rabin, there was Arafat. They weren't compatible. And when there is a moderate, a pragmatic leader like Mahmoud Abbas, like Abu Mazen, he has Netanyahu to contend with. That's our luck.
Lucy, I want to suggest an angle. Abu Mazen, since the Oslo Agreement, actually since the second Intifada, is imposed to a situation in which he, the man who is always in a very consistent way being against violence, needs to think whether it is in the interest of the Palestinian that this wave of stabbings, this wave of violence may help to move something in the peace process. Abu Mazen is in a very controversial situation. On one hand, he is 24/7 following and assuring that this wave will not escalate to a new round of suicide bombings, of fire shootings. On the other hand, because he is given nothing by the Israelis, he is obliged to think maybe this situation, first he say, I have no interest to confront with the people that is supporting the stabbing wave. And second, he start to think that maybe he will gain something through this wave of interest. And in the mood of Abu Mazen is very bad.
Say that the White House just reported and is saying that there will be no breakthrough in the Barack Obama's term during this.
And this helps, of course, Abu Mazen and Abu Mazen mood. Abu Mazen understand that the Israeli current government will deliver nothing, and this is why, and maybe Minister Al-Ajrami can help us, he, for the first time since long time, is considering to reconcile this time not with Hamas, but with his internal rival, Fatah Muhammad Ahlan.
In this specific issue, with his own rivals inside his party, with the people who are starting to look and maybe to feel the chair of the presidency in the Palestinian Authority, these specific people are, and from what I'm hearing from security analysis in the Israeli side, is that these specific people, the people who wants to be the replacement of Mahmoud Abbas, they are the ones who want this wave of terror to continue. They are the ones who want to take the place of Mahmoud Abbas, and for them, this situation is perfect, what is happening right now with this wave of terror.
I don't think so, because no one in the Palestinian leadership knows what will happen after a while, because this movement is an youth initiative. It is not from the Palestinian factions, that's from the Palestinian leadership. Even if my colleague Ali said is true that they want to get benefit of this situation, I think that the leadership is satisfied of what happens, because it can or may move the situation, or at least to remind the international community that the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is still there, and it needs the intervention, strong intervention from the international community. But on the other hand, they are afraid of losing control of the whole situation. because this is an individual initiative and youth initiative.
Is it an individual initiative? Because from, there are some rumors that some people, high-ranked officials in the Palestinian Authority who are blinking towards the presidency, they are paying the people, their people are paying to some gang members money to actually go and pay these young children to go out and do whatever they're doing here inside Israel.
Some Palestinian leaders are sponsoring, you'd find them as gangs, I would say, sponsoring some Palestinian militants, especially former members of the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades. But as far as I know, no one of them were directly involved in these attacks. When some reclamation of responsibility of this or that attack came under the name of the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades, I know that leaders of the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades, former leaders, call all the news agencies to deny any connection with the attacks.
As you mentioned, there is a problem with the succession process. If the president of the Palestinian Authority is not able to govern anymore for whatever reason, there is the Speaker of Parliament, but he is a Hamas member, Aziz Dwaik. Nobody is going to give him the keys to the kingdom. Now,
yes.
Of the others, you have veterans of diplomacy of the Oslo process, people like Saib Erekat and Nabil Shahad. They don't have the security credentials or the armed struggle credentials. You have Mohammed Dakhlan and Jibril Rajoub, and you have people in jail like Marwan Barghouti. He is already 13 years in prison for 5 consecutive life sentences, but nevertheless... 7 already?
7.
Okay, but never, he took part, according to the Israeli authorities, in 5 murders. So maybe it's 7 already. But in any event, it's time for him to be...
Lucy added 2, because I knew that it was 7.
I know that it was 7.
Many
yes, so perhaps now the Israelis will relent. Enough time has passed for him to contend. And you have people without political power, like Salam Fayyad, the former prime minister. And the big question is, what will the security service chiefs do? If there is an orderly process of succession, they will not intervene. But if not, maybe we will see a coup d'etat. Maybe they will fight each other, because eventually people with guns may decide who the next ruler is.
I wonder, each and every president, each and every leader leaves some kind of a legacy. What is the legacy that Mahmoud Abbas is leaving after he will leave his office?
Well, this is the problem, that President Mahmoud Abbas feels that there is no main or remarkable achievement of his period, especially because in his period there was a division between Gaza Strip and West Bank, and there were many wars, and the political process.
Even a unity government between Fatah and Hamas didn't work.
Nothing works in a positive way. So because of that, I think that President Mahmoud Abbas searched something this period. Maybe the Egyptians can give him such achievement if he can reconcile.
Do they really want to give him this achievement?
Yeah, the Egyptians want to see President Abbas strong, or at least want to ensure that transition process will be will happen in a stable way, not in a way that will bring Hamas speaker to be the transition president of the Palestinian Authority. But I want to say to what Amir said or hinted about coup d'etat, there is a post-Dayton process that happened after 2005-2006 in the Palestinian Authority that limited the force and the power of the chiefs of the security services in the Palestinian Authority. It is true that Ziad Habarih of the Preventive is strong. It is true that Majid Farah is strong, but they are not as strong as Jibril Rajoub or Mohammed Dahlan were when they were the chief of the security services before 2005. This is why I exclude the possibility of a coup led by the chief of the security services.
But Lucy, we can predict safely what scenario will take place. An unpredictable one. because nobody really predicted what happened throughout the last several years. So probably everything we analyzed here might end up in the dustbin of history.
And it seems that nobody is predicting anything, but it seems that the United States just really gave up on everything that is happening between the Israelis and the Palestinians when they are saying today that maybe the two-state solution died and maybe the two sides need to go to one-state solution. This is something new. Gentlemen, thank you very much for this. And for the first time ever, the Quran has been translated by a Muslim into Hebrew. The initiative was spearheaded by an Arab-Israeli school teacher. I-24 News correspondent Nasreen Ibrahim went to meet him.
In an unprecedented step in Israel, the holiest book in Islam has been translated and published in Hebrew by Subhi Adawi, a teacher of the Arabic language. He's the first Muslim in the world to translate the Quran into Hebrew, doing so with the help of a Jordanian organization.
I translated the Quran to Hebrew because the people of Israel have a serious role in it. Out of 114 chapters, the people of Israel are mentioned in 51, so Jewish readers should have access to the Quran in their mother tongue.
The tense atmosphere in Israel in recent weeks seems like an opportunity for Adawi to bridge the gaps between Muslims and Jews, whose similarities are too often lost in translation.
I began working on the translation 3 years ago, and it's a coincidence that it's published now, in these difficult times. But these difficult times affect everyone, Israelis, Palestinians, and they also affect us, the Arab citizens of Israel.
Adawi, a father of 6, lives in the village of Turan and has been teaching Arabic for 4 decades. A large number of his students throughout the years have been Israeli Jews, which gave him insight into translating the Muslim text.
My knowledge of the 2 languages, Arabic and Hebrew, was a great advantage in translating the Quran, especially because it's an elaborate and complex text. Previous translations to Hebrew have been inaccurate, as they were not done by a Muslim who has lived with this text their entire lives.
The project was well received among Arabs and Jews in Israel at a time when such initiatives have become few and far between.
Yes, maybe it will be a beginning for a new dialogue through religion. Thank you for being with me tonight. Tomorrow I'll be here again from the Jaffa Port, Israel. Have peace. Have a great day.